When we first started our businesses together, we vowed that we were not going to take on debt because there were many times where neither you or I would bring in a paycheck. And so
Yeah.
we just make sure that what we were spending was far less than what we were bringing in. We did a lot of reinvesting back into our business and back into the employees that we then did bring on.
One was an emergency fund. We really early on, we set up a business emergency fund and we put money aside knowing that just like in life, emergencies happen because creditors are bad, but owing money to the IRS is probably the worst. Whether it's sites like Upwork or Freelancer or even Fiverr, and there's a lot more that I'm not even thinking of. It's so much easier to find people now, especially if it's short-term gig work.
It's like low-hanging fruit, it seems
Yeah.
to me like an easy sale, so to speak. It's already really warmed up, and so it doesn't take much to get that sale when you already have the partner collaborating with you to pass that potential sale over to you. And one of the things I found very important about new employees, no matter what role they're in, is that good day and welcome to Business Alchemy. My name is Beth Mast and I am here with Jonathan Mast, my frequent partner in lots of different endeavors. And today we're talking about scaling with sanity. So Jonathan and I have been in a few different businesses together, and we're going to talk about how we managed to do that without ruining our marriage and losing our minds. How you doing today, Jonathan?
Good. So it's been a few hours since we talked. So good to be able to connect here and looking forward to talking about this. Scaling, as you know, is one of the things I love to do. And I think, you and I have always done things a bit differently than what is the, let's say, the norm when it comes to scaling and some of the parameters and so maybe even rules that we follow. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion today.
Absolutely. Well, I think I kind of take on the logical approach, but you've always done a really good job of looking outside of the box, so to speak, and being a little more creative as you bring ideas into the partnership. And then we talk those through. And between your creative and out of the box thinking and my logical side, I think we've come up with some really good, successful plans that have panned out well. But that took a lot of time and learning to do. I mean, we've had our share of bumps and bruises along the way.
We certainly have, but I think you're right. I think that our two disparate personalities actually work really well in this case to come up with a plan that works. And for those of you that may be joining us for the first time here, Beth and I are very different as individuals, but yet we're committed to working together and have found that commitment has really worked out. And I think this is a good example of that because oftentimes where I may settle or where you might settle or at least start may not be best, but we do share the same overall objectives. We share the same
Mhm.
goals and the same values. And so it's been very interesting from my perspective to see how we've both approached essentially trying to get to the same place, but we do so in such different ways. And I think together we've made some really good paths to do that.
I think it's important for those who may have not seen any of our previous podcasts, but just to note that picking out a partner is so critical in the success and longevity of your partnership, and making sure that you have the same values and the same foundational objectives really is important. We certainly have that, but definitely, as you said, how we actually get from point A to
Mhm.
point B, it can be very different. And so we've really had to ensure that we have a lot of communication within that process to make sure that we're still both alive when we get to point B.
Well, and just working through some of that process, while I understand accounting and I understand a lot about the numbers, the details frustrate me. And, you've spent years trying to get me to do budgets, and I still struggle with those. Yet I know they're important. So, it's one of those things that, sometimes it takes that yin and yang to really work well together.
Mhm. Well, and I'm looking forward to sharing with our viewers today some of the key things that we did as we were going through our different business ideas and as we were implementing them to really be able to go from that initial seed into a productive, a larger company that would actually support us financially.
Hmm.
And so I'd love to get started on that now. One of the things I think to mention again that's very important is when we first started our businesses together, we vowed that we were not going to take on debt. We also vowed
Correct.
we weren't going to have an office and we weren't going to have employees, but those kind of went to the wayside. But we
Well,
really
those were more negotiable though.
That's true. That's true. We have really stuck to the idea, though, that we were not going to take on debt. And at times that's actually been a little painful. But
Yeah.
for longevity, I think it's been so, so critical. When we first started, let's just say way back when we started Valorous Circle, and we didn't have a lot of money, obviously,
Hmm.
and nothing much was coming in to support us. I
Yes.
maintained another job. You actually had another job. You were
Yep.
doing the sales. And then we would basically go down to the basement. My fingers were so cold. I'll never forget that. But
Yes, I do.
execute the work in the evening then.
Yep.
And that's how we started out. So we had to be really smart about it financially. But then when we would actually make a sale and that money, that revenue would come in, it was so tempting to reward myself with something by spending it because we had sacrificed and we had
Right.
really worked hard to
Absolutely.
get that.
Hmm. No,
Did
so true. I
did
mean, we talked
you
about some of
ever
that on the
feel
last
that way
podcast.
too?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you remember in the last podcast, we talked about, that 48-hour rule that we had, because it's like we've worked so hard, we've done all this, and now I just want to spend just a little bit of money. And it always seemed like a great idea until maybe 48 hours later when I didn't have any desire to buy that anymore. But yeah, definitely that. And that's definitely something that, I know we've both struggled with, kind of like the debt issue. I mean, we've both been very committed not to take on any debt. And that's for you and I, that was a good decision. And I'm really glad we've done that. There's been times when one of us at any point in time said, well, maybe, just maybe we should change this. Generally me, not you. And then, the other has always been able to stand up and say, look, this is one of those core principles that we've really built on.
Right.
And it's saved us so much heartache and so
Mhm.
much stress in the overall picture, because businesses do ebb and flow and incomes ebb and flow. Some years are better than other years. We've been blessed to have a lot of years of growth, but we've had some years that have been tighter as well.
Mhm.
And when you don't have debt in those cases, going back to that one commitment of ours, it makes life so much easier because you don't feel like you're beholden to every creditor in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the key thing that I always felt I had to focus on, and we did quite well, was really just cash flow. So, what
Hmm.
was the cash coming in, and then what cash needed to go out? And just being aware of that and knowing where our money was being spent was
Yes.
probably the first and most important thing that had to happen in order for us to scale and
Yeah.
and to be able to survive because there were many times where neither you or I would bring in a paycheck. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we needed to make sure that what we were spending was far less than what we were bringing in. I also thought that when we would bring in business, we really committed early on that that revenue that we would bring in, and especially the profit then after all the expenses had gone out, that that profit would go back into the business. So we did a lot of reinvesting back into our business and back into the employees that we then did bring on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and it was a big part as we brought on employees, knowing that we were not making a decision of can we afford them this month, but can we afford them for the next year? It's
Right.
really how we looked at things. And that did mean we grew a little bit slower. But I think if we look back at the history, we grew very sustainably as a result of that too. And, we didn't want to be one of those flash in the pan, we're making lots of money, and then all of a sudden everything implodes and goes up. Obviously, there's always that risk when you're running a business, but I think sticking to some of the things that we've done as we've scaled, which is really what we want to talk about today, has been really important in scaling in a sustainable fashion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And those employees really were very critical, as they continue to be to this day, in helping us obviously make that revenue. I mean, we can't do everything ourselves. So keeping them satisfied and rewarding them for their work and really
Mhm.
building a culture of ownership, I think has been critical in just having the best team that we can have and having the team that we have really buy into what we're doing. And that then also means longevity. And if you don't have a lot of uh, basically, what am I trying to say? Turnover,
Right.
it's really more economically efficient, because every time you have to have a new employee, someone leaves and someone comes on, not only have I found that our productivity has gone down, but it costs more money just in the time that we then have to train them, teach them what's going on, build them up, get their confidence where it needs to be. And so really, I have found that scaling with Sanity has had a lot to do with the employees and how we treat them.
No question about it. No question about it. Well, we've talked a lot about some various concepts. Should we kind of go back and maybe lay out what some of our core principles were? I know you've mentioned reinvesting in the business, that being one of the big ones. No
Mhm.
debt, that's been another big
Mhm.
part. But there was also something else that we did early on, and I can think of actually two things. One was in the notes that we talked about, one not. One was an emergency fund. We really early on, we set up a business emergency fund and we put money aside, knowing that just like in life, emergencies happen.
Yes.
And I think that was helpful. The other thing, and I don't know where this fits in, and you and I have both been big on this, particularly me, because I've had an employer in the past prior to being self-employed that didn't
Right.
do this. When we did payroll, we always took money out for taxes and we
Yes.
put it aside and we locked it away proverbially and
Yes.
never touched it because
Mhm.
you and I have both seen businesses that, okay, for those of you who may not know, a lot of times businesses pay quarterly. And I know some of that's changed now. Oftentimes it's every payroll, but it used to be quarterly. And that meant you didn't really get in trouble till the end of the year when all of a sudden the IRS went, where's all these payroll taxes for
Mhm.
all of your employees that you haven't paid? And we've seen businesses go under because they raided that piggy bank of taxes that have been withheld to fund the business. And that just caused obviously immense heartache because creditors are bad, but owing money to the IRS is probably the
Oh,
worst
yeah. Let's not do that. Let's avoid that at
ever.
all
Yeah.
costs. I actually went into our bank account, and we have our primary, what I call operating account. And then I created a sub account to that that was for savings. And then I also have a second account kind of over underneath the master that's also a checking account, and that's
Mhm.
specifically for the payroll. So every time we have a payroll, have had a payroll, and I still do this today, I will go in, and whatever the accountant tells me that the total amount is that we're paying out, including taxes, that gets transferred out of the operating account and directly into the payroll account. And then the accountant actually does the direct deposit for the individual employees. And then they pay, the state and the IRS, and used to be the city. We don't have city tax where we are right now. So I just knew that if I moved that out, I wouldn't see it. It would be in the payroll account, and then the accountant would take care of it from there. Now, once upon a time, I actually did the payroll myself, and it was the same concept, but I still wouldn't touch it. I really kept the two separate. So I
Mhm.
knew all of our expenses were coming out of that operating account, and any owner's draws or anything like that that we could take, I would take out of the operating account. So that money and the taxes was always there in the payroll. It was a do not touch, do not look, leave it alone.
Well, and I remember a couple times, well, I remember one time, I guess, when that actually really benefited us in the fact that, again, because that money got put away and it was like a lockbox, you didn't even see it. And it was a while back, but I remember the accountant reached out at one point and said, hey, we, the accounting firm, we messed up and we didn't send in some quarterly tax payments that we were supposed to. We got to send those in. And of course, first response is, oh, crap, where are we
Yes.
going to come up with all this money? And
Wow.
then I remember looking into that account, and well, actually you did, and we were talking about it, and you're like, it's all good. The money's all there. They just didn't pull it out. And
Right.
that could have been a true nightmare because
Mhm.
they were a few months behind. And had we been looking at that and paying attention to that account and going, wow, there's extra thousands of dollars in there from payroll that hasn't been paid,
Mhm.
assuming that the IRS had been paid, we could have easily taken some of that money for other costs and other expenses. And then when that call came from the accountants going, oops, the accounting firm messed up, we would have been in a lot of pain at that point. So I want to really
Absolutely.
reiterate the importance of when that goes in there, it's gone. You don't even look at it. It's not, yeah, I mean, yes, I know it shows up as an asset or a liability, but that money is not yours no matter what.
Right, right. And I just want to have a little side note here too, the importance of having an accountant or payroll team service that you really trust and that is one of integrity.
Yes.
So definitely do your research on that before you just pick anyone, because you want to make sure that the people handling your funds actually do get it to the destination and not into their own pocket, because they
Yeah.
have access to that particular bank account. Now, the nice thing is it's just that one part of the bank account as well. So I actually limit our risk by not giving them access to our main operating account or our savings account. It's just the payroll account.
No, good, very good point. Very, very good point. Well, that kind of brings up the question, since we're talking payroll, as you're scaling a company, obviously one of the things that most companies need is they need more help. They need to bring on employees, contractors, whatever to help with that. And when you're not taking on debt and you're minimizing that risk, one of the things, and again, we've never really operated off lines of credit or anything like that. So we've always operated off of that safety net that we had. We were kind of our own line of credit. But
Mhm.
that meant that sometimes we needed help, but we weren't ready, at least, to bring on a full-time employee. Can you talk to everybody here about I mean, I know the answer, but what were some of the things that we did? I'm thinking one in particular of we had that need, and maybe we weren't ready for a 40-hour week, but we wanted somebody 20 hours a week. What would we do at that point in time instead of just bringing on a full-time W-2 employee to help manage that cost
Mhm.
and that risk, probably more than anything?
Right. Well, we would outsource. We would get
Yeah.
basically a contractor and bring them on. And now, especially, one of I'm going to say the benefits of COVID, but the benefits of that situation is that there's a whole lot more gig work out there and people who are willing to work from home and for multiple companies because they have a skill or a service they can provide. And so it's much easier to actually find a contractor now
Mhm.
that can do what we need and for a reasonable rate.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
I do want to say again, this is just my mind thinking, be careful of risk. Make sure you find someone again who's credible and has good reviews and that type of thing as well. But yeah, we definitely relied on our our contractors, those third party services
Mhm.
to help us out until we had enough revenue, enough business coming in a given area to really be able to justify the new position. And
Right.
often, especially in a small business, if maybe it was you and me, we started off wearing all the hats, and then we would bring on an employee that would take a few of those hats from us using skills they had. And then we'd bring on another employee to take off a few of those hats, and then that would continue to build. And now I'm at a point where most of my employees have one essential hat. Obviously, they
Mhm.
have lots of different tasks and stuff, but it took a long time to get there. I had to build the revenue up in order to be able to pay them. And there are still things that I do at Valorous Circle that require a third party or a contractor. So I still use them.
Well, and it makes sense, and like you said, it's so much easier nowadays. I mean, whether it's sites like Upwork or Freelancer or even Fiverr, and there's a lot more that I'm not even thinking of. It's so much easier to find people now, especially if it's short-term gig work. It's
Mhm.
much easier now to be able to locate somebody that, let's say
A
you don't
video
want to do the
editor
social media.
is one.
Yeah, video. There you go. Yeah,
We
you
use
you
that
need
a
you
lot.
you decide to take video seriously and do it, but you don't want to edit video. Well, that's all right. You can find people from all over the world, the United States as well, that are willing to do that on a contract basis. In fact,
Yes.
one of the contractors that Valorous worked with for many years was located literally 45 minutes away, but we found him on Upwork and then ended up working with him for multiple years doing video editing, video work, and things like that, because we had a need for that, but we didn't have a 40-hour a week need. And so
Mhm.
it allowed us to pay a competitive rate. He had a video business and he did this for other agencies as well. But, we could go meet with him. He could come to our office. It was fantastic. And if we needed him 4 hours one week, we paid him 4 hours. If we needed him 40, we paid him 40. It
Mhm.
really worked out well.
Well, in another area that more recently for Valor Circle that has come into play is actually the automation aspect of what we're doing. There are so
Mhm.
many great programs out there now that we can utilize to automate a lot of, let's say, our client communications, and for our clients, for them to use to automate their customer communications. Well, I don't need nor can I afford at this time. I can't justify a full time 40 hours a week automation specialist.
A
So
great example.
we use somebody in a different state, and he's great, and he's able to work us in, and one week to another, because he has another job on top of that. One week we might use him 20 hours, and the next week might use him 2. So
Right.
it works out well. But that is definitely an area that I really don't foresee right this minute that I'm going to need to bring on somebody full time. But I do think with the way technology is, and AI, and just the development of that and how quickly it's happening, I do think there will come a point when that will be a standard position in most companies.
Yeah, no, I agree, and of course, AI is one of those soapboxes I'd love to get on. I won't here because I know that's not the purpose of this podcast.
Not this
So
one, at
I'll
least.
yeah, I'll stay off that soapbox for now. But I think you're absolutely right, Beth. As you look at where business is headed, I think it's going to become easier and easier for those contractors to be located and found and used. And then I believe what's going to happen. I know people have different perspectives on the contractor economy, but many of those contractors are going to work into full-time positions at your company
Mhm.
because you are going to be able to grow in. Without those contract positions, you wouldn't necessarily have the ability to go down this avenue for your business to grow in an area because you just didn't have the funds or the business to bring on somebody for 40 hours a week. But if I have enough to bring on somebody, maybe 10 for right now, and maybe in
Right.
a quarter it's 20 or 30, and a year from now it's 40 because we've grown that part of the business. Now, not only has the contractor benefited, but also has the business and our clients, because we were able to serve them in new ways that maybe in the past we wouldn't have been able to serve at all.
Mhm, mhm. I've also found, kind of working side by side with that contractor, if I have someone on the team currently that's interested, or maybe they're currently doing that little bit of, let's just say, automation. If I can find someone on my team who will champion that, meaning that they'll really decide they wanna learn more about something, that they're willing to work alongside that contractor, that they're willing to give that contractor guidance and direction, I really find that to be very beneficial to our company. And well, automation excites several of my employees.
Mm.
So I had multiple hands go up when I was looking for that champion. But I was able to then have someone on my team who would work with that contractor so that I didn't necessarily have to. But way back at the beginning, it was you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just it made a huge difference in how we were able to do things. So I love automations, by the way, but again, that's not the purpose of this one. That'd be a good topic to put down though. I think, just talking about how can businesses use automation, because it's not just digital marketing agencies that can use them. It's any business that's out there can use them to help better engage their customers, save payroll, all of those things. You had talked in our notes a little bit kind of about some step-by-step scaling, how we grew and continue to in some manageable increments that can be supported by the cash flow that's coming in. And you had one thing in there that I really love talking about, and that's loyalty programs that increase that lifetime retention, or increase retention and the lifetime value of clients. And I know that's something that multiple businesses that we've worked in and worked on together have done. I know both of our businesses now do loyalty programs.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit to the audience about maybe why we implemented some of those, Beth? And from your perspective, while every loyalty program is going to be different, what are maybe a couple key characteristics in putting those together? Because I know I oftentimes would get to the point that I would create something to be not too sustainable, either from a recording standpoint or whatever. And you always did a great job of taking a look at our objectives and figuring out how do we create something that we don't have to next month change again because we overbit or we overmanaged or created something too complex. What
Mhm.
do you recommend when people look at loyalty programs? I guess first why and then kind of how.
Well, I think there's a larger thing to look at here. Loyalty programs, of course, will hopefully increase your client retention. And the longer you can have a client working with you, the more efficient working with that client becomes. And on top of that efficiency, you have a longer, or I should say, a higher uh, client lifetime value. And
Hmm.
so knowing that I can have good retention and keep a client on longer, it's sort of like you don't want turnover employees. You don't really want turnover in clients either. So you really want to be able to keep them as long as possible. And that really does help one scale with Sanity to have long time clients as well as long time employees. So I think it's really important that we look at that, and how can we keep them? Well, we can keep them by rewarding them for being with us, for being a
Hmm.
loyal client. And so that would be something that we would do. I still do that. So in addition to loyalty programs, I think that it's important to also find ways through the sales process that we can find clients more easily. And I know you really worked hard on partnerships and
Mm.
finding other companies to work with affiliate programs. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I often refer to them as joint ventures, and not in a way that there's a formal joint venture partnership. But you're right. I would look for people that serve the same clients that we wanted to work with, but did something different than us. And
Mhm.
as a digital agency, one of the things that we built Valorous with originally was reached out to a lot of IT companies because we found that businesses generally had an IT company they were working with, especially the businesses that we wanted to work with that were, the larger size of the small business. And they generally had an IT company they worked with. And when they had a need for a website, which is obviously where Valorous Circle started, they often began by going to the IT company because in people's heads, websites and IT, they were the same thing. You and I know they're very different, but they're both on a computer. And so everybody thought, well, it's the same thing. So they would go to their IT company and go, hey, I need a new website. And 99% of the IT companies out there would go, yeah, we don't do websites because that's like a whole other thing. That's like, the difference between speaking Spanish and English, I guess, they're very different. They're both languages, but that's about it. And those partnerships with IT companies really, I don't know the exact amount, but I bet it probably brought in some years 20 to 30% of the business that we did that year through those partnerships. And those worked out really well because we would then compensate the partners for bringing that in. We worked hard to nurture those relationships and then would get referrals from them. And the benefit to us as an agency, and could be to you if you're listening to this, is that they generally worked with the same exact customers we wanted to work with. And when that IT company would go, hey, you need to talk to Jonathan over at Valor Circle, or you need to talk to whomever at Valor Circle, it was like being ushered in the door as an expert. And it was really then our deal to lose
Mhm.
as opposed to just competing in many cases because we were referred by a trusted party. And they're like, well, if you guys are the ones we're supposed to work with, then that's what the IT company says. We'll work with you. Again,
Right.
assuming we didn't stumble over ourselves and we were competitive and all that. It's not a carte blanche for free business, but those joint ventures or joint partnerships, probably a better way to look at it, really were critical. And even for Whitebeard strategies today, as you know, I'm setting up more and more of those joint partnerships every single week
Mhm.
because they then bring in content jobs and other opportunities to Whitebeard Strategies that I'd never know about, because essentially I'm now creating another sales channel where somebody else is out there. They're hearing about the need that I want to fill. And if I can make it easy for them and trustworthy, all of a sudden I can really, really catapult my business sales as a result of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's like low hanging fruit. It seems
Yeah.
to me like an easy sale, so to speak. It's already really warmed up. And so it doesn't take much to get that sale when you already have the partner collaborating with you to pass that potential sale over to you. And if there was one thing that I wish that we'd done a little differently within our business earlier on, is I really wish I had brought on a client success associate earlier on to really work with our current clients a little more in depth than we did, a little more regularly, more touch points to really work on that relationship. Because I found that we were so busy, especially when we were on a kind of a one-time, one and done model instead of
Yeah,
a
the
monthly
project
recurring
basis. Yep.
revenue. Yeah, more project based. We were so focused on getting new sales that we didn't have people within our team focusing on nurturing our current clients to really pick that low hanging fruit. So I really wish that we had done that sooner. It's really worked out well for me doing that at Valorous Circle just in the last year or so, to have someone really focused on that. I actually spent a little bit longer than that now, because I started with a client care manager who would just call up our current clients. How you doing? What can we do better? Do you have any needs? These are promotions maybe that we're having. Having that communication going on, keeping us top of mind so that they would come to us first. So I really wish I'd done that earlier on, and I would highly recommend it to anyone starting off or is in a smaller agency perhaps, or has a smaller business, that they think about having someone, or at least some of your own hours within a week, focused on that type of thing.
Well, and this I want to point out is one of the hardships of working with a partner, because Beth had wanted this role for many years when we were both at Valorous Circle prior to my leaving. And I was generally the one that pushed back on that, because as a salesperson, I was always the hunter. I went out and killed things and brought them back to the house, so to speak. That's what I did. And I wasn't a farmer. I wasn't a nurturer. And that was a shortcoming that I didn't really realize in myself at that time, nor did I see the value, because as a hunter, so many of the sales reps that I'd seen fail over the years were people that didn't like to cold call and didn't like to do this.
Right.
And so they wouldn't be successful. So in my mind, I'm like, no, good salespeople have to be hunters. When in the reality is you need both in your
Yes.
organization. You need people to go out and find new stuff. They're going to go find those new clients and bring them in. But generally, and I know there are exceptions, generally the people that are really good at that aren't really good at then nurturing on a long-term
Right.
basis,
Mhm.
because they lose interest. It's not as much fun to close a small deal. It's much more fun to close the big one.
Right.
And that was me. And so that's one of the dangers in a partnership. And I want to encourage you, if you're out there, to have those difficult conversations when they come up, and work through those, because Valorous would have been better. Our clients would have been better served had Beth won that battle, so to speak, earlier on in the relationship, because we saw it. I mean, we would have clients that we thought we had a good relationship with that had never complained, had even given us great reviews. And all of a sudden we'd get a call and they'd be like, oh, I'm getting a new website done,
Right.
or
With
probably
someone
not that,
else.
because we were actually really good with the websites, but it was normally things like, we're going to have somebody else do SEO for us. And we're like, well, hang on, we do SEO. And they're like, I didn't even know you guys did SEO.
Right.
You never told us you did SEO. And guilty as charged, we didn't do a good job of that. And that's actually kind of brings us full circle back to the automation tools. And I know this isn't the episode for that, but automation tools nowadays can really help your business on that nurture side as well, because you need to stay in touch with people 20 plus times a year just so they remember you.
Right. It's
And
amazing.
yeah, so yeah, I totally agree. I'm the reason we didn't do it sooner. And again, it's one of those pitfalls of a partnership. be willing to have those hard conversations and discuss them, because it really can make a big, big difference. And it would have helped Valor Circle and our clients had we done that sooner.
Mhm. I just want to point out here, though, I am not looking to place any blame whatsoever. It worked out the way it did for a
It
reason.
did.
And there were other benefits to that. And since we were for so long project based, we really needed to have that strong hunter on board that would go out and get those. Now that you're not with Valor Circle, I've recreated or restructured the sales team, and I'm very happy with it. However, we have a lot of strong farmers, and really trying to find a hunter that will do those cold calls, that will find those potential clients or prospects initially, has become more difficult. Now that's kind of the area that I really have to focus on. So you're right, you need both. You need a hunter, you need a farmer, and you need them to work together. So one person sales teams don't generally work. You're going to have something missing one place or the other.
110%. And again, I appreciate that. I didn't think you were trying to place blame, just for those that may be listening. It's just, the reality is that's one of those partnership things that comes up, and I was the reason. And I think there's value in talking through that and looking back to and going, okay, hey, here's an oversight we made and why we made it. You know me, Beth, I'm always, not only am I interested in resolving, but I'm always trying to find out why, what's behind that, because I don't want to make the same mistake on multiple occasions. And so I've gotten really good at making new mistakes versus making the same mistake. Yeah, it's true. Somebody's got to embrace it, and I'm good with that. So I'm fine with that. But no, that's a really key thing. And again, that account manager role, or whatever you want to look at it, really is a critical role in maintaining those relationships. And it's been really rewarding from my perspective to see how that, now that Valor Circle has brought those roles on, as you said, it's happened over the last couple of years, what value that meant for client retention and keeping them. And as we've learned from a business coach that we both use, that client retention is probably one of the most important things in long-term scalable, sustainable growth.
Absolutely.
Because every time you lose a client, you've got to go replace them.
Exactly.
And there's a balance there, but that account manager role has done such wonders to increase that retention.
We definitely focus a lot on what is our churn rate, because it's equally as important as to what our sales rate is. So what we're closing, what we're losing, coming in the front door, going out the back door. We need to look at both of those equally and put emphasis on both of those. And keeping someone, again, is often a different personality or a different focus than getting a new client. So in addition to new sales and what we've been talking about here, I think one of the things that we need to talk a little bit more about is really how we boost revenue. So maybe how we can diversify, or what can we do with how we price things that might help in those times of scaling and allowing us to scale. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. Actually, I had a flashback as you were talking about that, sitting with one of our first business coaches. You and I have always been big believers in business coaches, and we were doing some quarterly planning. And this was a couple years back, but we had not adjusted our pricing in many years at Valor Circle at the time. And one of the things, his name was Scott, that Scott shared with us was, hey, you guys really need to make an adjustment in your pricing. And it was legitimate. I mean, we were underpriced for what we were doing. But I remember I was really scared to do that. I was like, oh my gosh, if we raise these prices, everybody's going to leave us and we're not going to have any clients and blah, 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 blah. That ADD part of me was going off. But I remember one of the things he talked about that was really important there. And it's not that you want to raise prices to gouge your clients, but sometimes you simply need to for market rates. Certainly we're in a heavy inflationary time right now for anybody that's watching in 2023. And hopefully it doesn't go too far into 2024, but probably will for a bit. Inflation's part of life. And so you need to raise your rates. And one of the things that Scott really taught us through that process was that, if we raised our rates, and my numbers may be off, but let's say we raised them by 10%. And 5% of our clients said, whoa, my goodness, never mind, we're out of here. Overall, the company revenues would still be increasing because of all that we kept. And I remember we made a huge jump at that point. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I believe, if I'm not off, we went up almost 25% in our pricing because it'd been so long since we'd
It
done
was
so.
significant. I'm gonna say it was even maybe a little greater than that, and
But in
it was
that
huge.
process, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm aware of, I don't think we lost a single client. I know we had a couple that are like, whoa, what's going on? And I remember one of them in particular, I won't say his name here, but he's like, what in the world's going on? And I'm like, hey, we literally haven't changed our rates in 6 years.
Mhm.
We're now getting caught up. And he's
Right.
like, well, I don't like it, but I like you guys. So, okay. And that was like the worst conversation we had. So I know that's always a fear of business owners, but it's one of the things we did in that area was, and since then, I think we've been a lot better about that in trying to take a look and make sure that our pricing does get looked at least annually.
Mhm.
And again, now I'm not involved in that anymore, but I know your management team is, and you just, if I'm not mistaken, just went through this again as you
We did.
reprice some of your packages
Yep.
to, again, ultimately deliver better value to the customers. I know you reworked a lot of things, but also in that process, there was a pricing change that happened in order to make sure that the business was going to be sustainable and that growth was going to be sustainable as well.
Right. We did just actually, raise our prices again. So, not only did I do a price increase, but we actually implemented for our, support desk kind of an after hours or emergency rate, which we had not done officially before. So when
Hmm.
we need to do something or we choose to do something for one of our clients, it's just at a higher rate if it's outside of our normal hours. And that's fair because I need to reward my team for being willing to do that outside of their normal hours. We really focus a lot on work-life balance, and so I want to make sure that they feel rewarded when they're doing something for a client kind of outside of that normal scope. I do want to mention, back when you were talking about raising the rates and that fear that we would lose a client,
Hmm.
over the years when we did make some raise increases, we did lose a few clients. It was never as many as we feared it would be by a long
Yes.
shot.
Yeah.
But the funny thing that happened was that often the clients we would lose, we really didn't mind losing.
Yeah.
Either we had kind of outgrown them, maybe they were having financial problems, but they tended to be difficult clients anyway. And I am definitely one to focus on, if it's a good fit, they're easy to work with. We're easy to work with. There's smoother communication. I know you've been talking just lately about working with someone with your new business who's kind of persnickety, and it
Yeah.
it makes more work for you, and then you lose efficiencies, and then you're spending more money basically working with that client. If they're not happy and we're not happy, it's just best that we part ways. And we've actually, I'm going to say, quote, fired some clients over the years, that fell into that area. And that was a hard decision to make. But again, scaling with sanity, we needed to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. I've got I can think of two opposite ends of the spectrum now. I've got multiple clients, but one of the clients I have, they're absolutely fantastic. They understand professional services, and when they want more, just yesterday they asked us to do a couple things, and before I could even talk to them about cost, he goes, "And I understand we're going to have to pay for it. It's not a problem."
I love clients
Wow,
like that.
music to my ears, because it was a way out of scope stuff. It's stuff we can do, but it's way out of scope. The other client, on the other hand, you mentioned, great person, nothing wrong. And this is not a personal thing. And I had to learn that over the years the hard way.
Mhm.
Firing a client doesn't mean they're not a good person. It just means they're not a good fit.
Right.
And, this other client that I have right now, and thankfully the engagement's almost over, but I would describe this person as persnickety, and they want lots and lots of revisions, and everything's got to be just so. And, I won't go into the details, but the whole point is, that client has taken so much more work. And guess what? Yes, I am doing the work. And I know some people would go, oh, you should just tell them you don't. And there's a point, but I'm big on leaving people happy when they
Mhm.
leave.
Mhm.
And this client is leaving because we're not going to continue working with them. It's not a good fit, but I still want to leave them with a good taste. So we're going to go out on a high note, but I'm very thankful, as is my team, because my team even mentioned it yesterday about, wow, I'm going to be really glad in another couple days when this particular project is over, so that we don't have to deal with this customer, because
Right.
They do. They cause us to go out of our normal cycle and our normal things. And while
Mhm.
it's not a big deal, the individual task we're doing is going to probably take an extra hour, not a huge deal in the big picture. The
Mhm.
problem is it's out of our norm. So it's an interruption into what we're doing. And it's an hour that could have been spent serving other clients much better.
Exactly, exactly. You just mentioned something that made me think of one of those differences between you and I. You talk about thinkers and feelers and that type of thing. You
Feeler.
and I'm definitely a thinker. But one thing you taught me is to not burn bridges. So just because you have to part with a client for whatever reason it is, let's make that as amicable as possible. And we've actually gotten some 5-star reviews for clients that we fired because we didn't want to burn the bridge. And often those clients, when they're ready and it is a good fit, we've had many come back to us later on. And because you ensured that we didn't burn the bridge, where I would have been more likely just to burn the bridge, it it offered that opportunity for them to come back to us, and that too is a very positive thing. When you have integrity and you have tact and diplomacy, but you are also very professional and kind. You really open the door for people to return to you when it's the right time for everyone.
Well, it's actually ironic you bring that up because as we've been having this podcast, and it'll get edited out, so people won't necessarily hear this. You heard I was typing on my keyboard, and what was I typing? Literally, a client that had again left Valor Circle probably a year and a half or so ago
And
to go in.
amicably.
Yeah, very amicably to go to greener pastures. Because of my long-term relationship with them, I know them, and they happen to reach out to me via text. They know I'm no longer at Valorous, but they're like, "Hey, you're my guy. What do I do?"
Mhm,
And I obviously referred them back to Valorous Circle.
mhm,
And as of this morning, they're coming back. Why? Because of the fact that, again, when they left, I didn't like to see a client leave. I don't ever like to see a client
right.
leave. But we always wanted to make that as smooth as possible, because what happened in this case has happened so many times. The grass looked greener on the other side of the fence. They left. It hasn't been greener. In fact, it sounds like it's been burnt, but who knows?
Mm,
It's not us at that point in time. And so now when their business needs a solution, what do? Well, they go back to the easiest thing, which is what most of us do, which is the safety that they knew when they were working with Valor
mhm,
Circle in this
mhm.
case. And that just happened to be a text message to me a couple days ago going, "Hey," and literally the client said, "The grass isn't greener over here like I thought it was. I really think I need to bring Valor Circle back in. What do I need to do?" And it was nice from my perspective. I was able to turn it over to your sales manager and support manager, and they're handling everything. But I was texting with the prospect a minute, just letting him know what was happening, communicating that. And I think it's just a great example of, again, how not burning a bridge is going to provide long-term value to the company at this point in time.
Mhm, mhm. Throughout the entire scaling process, as you start off to the time that you are a larger company, whatever large is for you, I think it's important that you treat your partner, you treat your employees, you treat your clients with trust, integrity, and respect. And if you can have and demonstrate those three things, you won't burn bridges and people will respect you more, because when we do something wrong at Valorous Circle, we step up and we say, "Hey, we dropped the ball here and we're going to fix it."
Yes.
At the same time, when we really provide outstanding service, and that's actually one way to provide outstanding service is by admitting when we've done something wrong and correcting it. But clients and employees both remember that, and they learn to trust you and they respect you. So just having that integrity is so important. And then, of course, I've had to frost a little bit of kindness as well. Not that I'm not a kind person, but in my delivery, in my emails, in the way I talk to people, I've just had to make sure that I put just a little bit of frosting on too, to make sure that they know my heart and not just hear the logical words I'm saying.
You bring up a really good point there, Beth, and one that as a sales rep, I have found to be really beneficial, but it's also hard. And that's that when you screw up, and sometimes we do,
Yep. We're
It's
human.
so much better to go to the customer and go, "Hey, I apologize. I made a mistake. And here's what I'm doing to resolve it now. And here's what we're doing so it doesn't happen again." With rare exception, and I cannot think of one, but there probably has been one over the years, that has helped instill confidence in the customers because they're not used to people coming back to them going, "Oops, I dropped the ball. Oops, I made a mistake." Now, it doesn't happen often. If it happens too much, it wouldn't work. But when that rare thing does happen, it makes all the difference in the world. Just the other day, I had a discussion through Whitebeard Strategies with one of the prospects I'm working with. I told him I was going to send him some information. As you know, there was a death in our family, and that caused us to be out of town for a couple weeks. And I was literally talking to him as I was pulling into the driveway to get you, as we were going to then head out of town to deal with the situation. And I made the cardinal sin, and I forgot to take notes on that call before we took off.
Oh,
So 2 weeks went by, and I had totally slipped my mind, totally forgot. He reached out and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I told him, "Hey, I dropped the ball." I explained, "Wow, I'm really sorry, Jeff. I literally was talking to you as I was going to pick up my wife. We'd had a death in the family. And I told him I forgot to write it down, and it didn't happen." Now,
mhm.
two things. One, I fixed it right away, immediately. And then I followed up with a phone call. And you'd think, wow, that was a huge screw up. It was supposed to be a couple days. It took 2 weeks. He had to remind you, yeah, big screw up. But because of the candidness that I had with him, Jeff now is forming a partnership with us to be one of those joint venture partners that I talked about. Because he said, "You just demonstrated integrity above and beyond what I'm used to." Nobody ever says they make mistakes. They would have said they sent it, and I would have not known because, hey, email doesn't always work or whatever. He goes, "You just immediately fessed up and told me what was going on, and you fixed it." He goes,
Right.
"I am so impressed with that." And that's not to gloat on me. It's not about me, but it's have that integrity and have that transparency. We're human. I've told clients for years, we're human. At some point, we're going to take perfect aim and shoot ourselves in the foot. The difference is that I'm going to tell you, "Hey, guess what? I just shot myself in the foot. And here's what I'm going to do not to do it again." And
Right.
I can never recall a time when that's happened. Thankfully, it hasn't been a lot that I've went to a prospect or a client and told them that it's cost us. It's always endeared us to them and built that
Right.
rapport and that reputation.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's hard in the moment. You want to think of a million excuses what could have
Right,
happened.
right, because it feels bad to let a client down. It feels bad
It
to let
does.
anybody down, and you wanna be able to do so much more for them, and it's so tempting, to kinda hide from it, but it's really, I think, a skill to kind of learn and a habit to build that you take that step forward and you say, "I'm the one," "I will take responsibility," and people are less likely to place blame if someone it regularly is there to take responsibility. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to do that. And scaling with sanity, that is just a huge thing. And if you demonstrate that when you're small, it's going to help you as you build to be larger, to be bigger.
One of the things that you have really taught me through the process of growing a business and scaling that business sustainably has been, and doing it with sanity, by the way, has been to create repeatable processes
Mhm,
and
mhm.
create systems that our teams could follow because it made their job so much easier, and it ensured that we were continuing to deliver the level of service to our clients that you and I wanted to deliver. You've done it at Valor Circle, and that's really where you taught me those lessons. I'm now doing that at Whitebeard Strategies. In fact, I was just going over all of the standard operating procedures that we have in
Yes.
place for
Mhm.
doing things. And I want to make sure we don't end without talking about how important that is, because as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to deliver consistency to your clients
Yes.
and that value. And there is no way to do that if you don't have repeatable processes.
Right. Well, it's very important to have either written out instructions or video instructions on all of the different processes within your business. And this is a commitment, it takes time. But if you do this or capture this as you come up to a given situation, a given task, whatever the case may be, and you just do a little bit at a time, you really can get through it pretty quickly. But it's important to be able to pass that information along to other people. And let's say you have an assistant and you want to teach that assistant how to do something. You can give that written SOP or that video SOP to them, and then they can follow those instructions. Well, if you should lose that assistant, perhaps they leave to go to another job and you get a different assistant, it's going to be so much easier to train them and so much faster to onboard them within the company if you can just give those videos or those written instructions to them. And it's like you do it once and you've got that captured, and then you can distribute that multiple times. And one of the things I found very important about new employees, no matter what role they're in, is that they can follow directions. And if
Yes.
you can follow directions, then having an SOP just made everybody's life so much easier. And several employees have said to me when they have been with Valor Circle and we've been, let's say, doing their 90-day review, that this was the one of the few companies, or maybe the only company they've ever worked with, that they actually were trained and that they weren't just thrown in to figure it out themselves. And wow, just to throw somebody in and have them figure it out, that's just wrought with inefficiencies. And so that just slows things down, takes up too much time, makes you less profitable, slows down your ability to grow, and you really need those SOPs to scale. And at the same time, I just want to mention three key words that I use at Valorous Circle with my team, and I have really been working a lot on that this quarter, especially, is that you want to simplify, you want to systematize, and you want to automate. So let's make
Mhm.
things as easy, as quick, as efficient as possible while still maintaining our quality, because you can get things to people fast, but if they don't have good quality, what was the point? So
Mm.
quality still has to be the number one thing. But in order to keep the price down and to keep everybody sane, you really need to do those three things. So it's definitely something that I really push at Valorous Circle, and my team is much happier for it.
Well, it makes it so much easier, and as you pointed out, as you scale, this episode's all about scaling with sanity. As you grow, it makes that growth so much easier because when some of those tasks get distributed to your new teammates now, it's not like they're throwing out in the middle of a lake in a canoe without a paddle and they don't know what to
With
do. They
alligators.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they now have a plan and it's like, okay, here's your task. And if the SOP is done well, by the way, AI really can help you finalize those too. But when it's done well, let's say I'll use an example that comes up for me. It's, taking content that we've created and linking it appropriately for SEO purposes.
Mhm.
When that's been documented properly, the training really is going through it one time with the new staff member, giving them a project and go, now you do that and just follow the checklist and go through it, and knowing that they're going to do a better job, they're going to deliver better value to your client, and they're going to your teammates are going to be happier
Right.
because of the fact that they're not confused and puzzled.
Mhm.
So huge value. One of the things I had to
Absolutely.
learn.
Mhm. And then the last little piece of that is making sure that you have given them permission to ask questions, because
Yes.
until that SOP is really tried out, you don't know how thorough or detailed it is. And sometimes we put something down on paper or on video, but there are certain assumptions we make in our head, and whoever's listening to that might not connect those same dots. And so you have to give them permission to ask questions and be available to answer those questions.
No, very good point. Very good point. But well, that's the last thing I think that we really had on our list about sustainable growth with sanity or scaling with sanity that I saw. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure we covered today?
No, but I definitely think we need to do that AI podcast really soon.
That would be cool. You know me. You'll have to get me to shut up on that one.
We'll have to limit the time just a little bit.
Just a bit, just a bit. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, Beth, and I really appreciate it. And we hope that us sharing about some of the things we've gone through, our struggles, our challenges, and our wins helps you as you're growing your business and as you're pursuing your entrepreneurial dreams and possibly even doing that with your partner. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. If you like this, we'd appreciate it if you'd share the episode with anybody else that you know. And please feel free to subscribe as well. And we always cherish your comments. Thanks, everybody, and make it a great day.
Bye-bye.